Welcome to the Demo Friday. My name is Michael Olschimke. I'm the CEO of Scalefree. We run the session here every Friday at 11 o'clock Central European Standard Time to allow you, the audience, to ask questions about data vaults, data mining, artificial intelligence, cloud computing, MVP clusters, any data-driven questions essentially allowed. You can use the chat here in a client if you want to raise a live question. You can use the Q&A function here. You can also use raise your hand and I give a voice. Don't misuse that. And I'll show you a link to a form later today, where you can also submit your questions. That allows me to essentially prep a short slide. I'm not spending that much time on it, but yeah, I'm prepared. And that's the idea. If you receive multiple questions, I would be cherry picking. The good question is time boxed. I mean, 10 minutes should be the answer essentially. And if there would be no questions at all, I will talk about the cluster. I haven't done much, so it's all good. So we have a question. So let me just jump in. This one is about PLT bridge tables in business logic. Let me just read this. In the data vault architecture, is it okay to reuse or reuse created pit and bridge tables in the code of the business vault of the business rules essentially? So can we use pit and bridge tables inside the code inside business logic, right? Yes, but here's the thing. Let me explain this a bit. In the book, but also in the training, in the data vault training, we have compute satellites, right? And typically the compute satellite has a structure just like the standard satellite in a raw data vault. So the primary key would be the hash key of the parent and then the load date. And then you have some compute attributes in the body of the satellite essentially. And it's good. Now think about this. In the raw data vault, everything is identified by a load date. Well, all the data, the batches of data is identified by a load date. And then in the information mart, the data or the information is identified partly by the snapshot date, right? So whenever we want to deliver the information to the end user, we create a new snapshot of information that's being delivered essentially. So the snapshot date identifies the outgoing batch of information. Load date, snapshot date. In between the raw data vault and the information mart, we have the business vault. And again, we typically have these compute satellites where we identify the delta by the hash key and load date. But it's only half the truth. Think about this. In your business logic, there's two types of granularities here. One set of business logic you want to apply on all the incoming deltas, like phone number cleansing. For every phone number coming from the raw data vault, you want to cleanse the phone number. And I would always cleanse all the deltas, even though you're saying, well, I only need the latest one. I always cleanse all the deltas because I don't know yet for my next target what is the delta I want to use. So I always cleanse all the deltas coming in. It's easier to load anyway. So cleansing all the phone numbers is really applied on the incoming deltas. So for every incoming delta identified by the hash key load date, I want to do some business logic. I want to apply some business logic and then store the results in my next satellite in the business vault. So the results are also identified by the hash key and load date. That's fine. But then there's other sets of business rules. Think about this, where you want to calculate a lifetime value of all your customers. And the lifetime value, when the customer orders something, goes a little bit up. And if they don't order something on that day, it goes a little bit down. Which means that even though there is no delta coming in because the customer didn't purchase something, you want to calculate some value because the lifetime value should go down a bit day by day when there's no order, right? So it can't be based on the incoming granularity, apparently. For every customer, for every day, I want to calculate a lifetime value. This granularity we already have in the pit tables because for every day, snapshot date, or every hour, every minute, whatever you want to calculate, right? But for every time frame, for every customer, I want to calculate something. That is the granularity of the alternate key in the pit table. Snapshot date, and hash key of the parent, the customer hash key. So we have that granularity, which means that we could create a pit table to create a compute satellite where we calculate the lifetime value of a customer. And that compute satellite uses the hash key of the parent and the snapshot date as the primary key. The thing is this, the business vault in between the raw data vault and the information marts. So some of your business logic is using the load date to identify the deltas, and some of the business logic is using the snapshot date because you're in between. Somewhere there is a switch. And I can't even tell you where the switch is on the pit tables and bridge tables. That introduces the snapshot date timestamp, and that switches the granularities. That's the basic idea. which means that we could build a compute satellite on top of the pit table using the pit table essentially in the front part, and also using the pit table to join all the descriptive data for my snapshot data, because I need to know what's the lifetime value of my customers, and that's based on some raw data. And the pit table index gives me access to all the deltas and all the satellites, which is great. So pit tables for sure, we can use that, and we use it actually a lot in the business logic. And then for the bridge tables, I would say yes. I would say it's it's more seldom used, so we don't use it that often. What you want to avoid is that a bridge table loads another bridge table. So typically, to avoid that, there's a trick. There's a computed aggregate link in the business vault. It's also in the book. A computed aggregate link is just a link with a computation, with an aggregation essentially. And that can be used for loading bridge tables. If you want to essentially reuse the aggregation, that's a trick. The reason for not load or cascading bridge loads is because we want to parallelize these loads. They take a bit of time, and you want to parallelize them. If you cascade them, if a bridge is being loaded from another bridge, you have a sequence, and that sequence avoids or prevents the parallelization across the cluster. That's why you want to avoid that. So never load a bridge from another bridge. Use computed aggregate links for that, which is a very similar concept though. So that's the idea. So and with that in mind, yes, you could use a bridge as a basis for some business vault entity. For example, when you want to, let's say you're on a row-based storage and you want to extend the facts by some new measure where you calculate something based on the fact of something. So for every fact, I want to calculate something. That's your granularity. That's the granularity coming from the bridge. So you could use that as a front part for your compute satellite and then calculate something, some value, some measure, and then attach it to the bridge table, for example. The bridge becomes the parent of this compute satellite, for example. And then you use that, join that for the fact entity, for example, just to reuse your computation. So it would be done. You don't do that often because it's less efficient than modifying the bridge table, which you can't avoid in very high volume anymore, right? So I've done it as well. That's what it is. So, but it's typically less used. So the answer is yes, by all means. You can use the pit and bridge tables, especially when you want to apply some business logic after the switch of the granularities in the business vault, right? Again, you have to switch from the load date, delta-driven raw data vaults identified by load date. You switch over to the snapshot date times based granularity of the outgoing information, and that snapshot timestamp is introduced by the pit and bridge tables. That's where it comes from, and then you can still apply some business logic, right? Business logic on the outgoing information granularity. That's the idea. So yeah, answers clear yes, essentially. Cool. If you have a question like this, good question by the way, use this form here behind this link, sfr.de/dvfriday. That's where you find a form where you can upload your question, essentially upload pictures if you want, small whiteboards or small diagrams essentially that fit on a HD screen, right? That all good. That's all good. And we have 2 more webinars, one on DBT and one on Wescape. Those you find at scalefree.2/webinar. Sorry for that. And if you can't wait until next Friday, and by the way, next Friday, that's close to Christmas, so I would skip next Friday. But yeah, which means that we close the office between Christmas and New Year, so we will meet in the first week of January, right? So if you can't wait until then, check out the Data Innovators Exchange, which is a forum-style community where you can also ask questions and get answers. Maybe not over the break, because both in Germany and in Australia, they're all doing essentially vacation or taking some days off. Scalefree is closing office actually, and sending everybody home for the New Year's Eve and everything else. So you have to wait a bit, but I wish you a Merry Christmas for those of you who participate in it, and for everybody else, have a nice, happy New Year, right? And see you in January, guys. Thank you guys for joining. See you guys.